Hi, and welcome back to Programming for Absolute Beginners and the Computer Illiterate. Last time we talked about a for loop, which let us repeat a chunk of code, a block of code for a set number of times, even though that we can decide at runtime what that number of times is, but it's always going to repeat for a finite number of times unless we, like I talked about, change the loop control variable I to something like to something else inside the loop, which is poor practice with a for loop. But the point of a for loop is that we know usually exactly how many times it's going to run. But sometimes you're going to want to run a loop for a variable number of times, and you're not sure how many because the condition is not a math-based condition. So let's say we wanted to make a loop where we're going to enter your name, and we wanted to make sure, or we wanted to run the loop every time you enter the wrong name, for instance. So I'll use my name as an example. Do file save. So if we do this, well, in this particular case, max times is undefined, so it's going to do some weird things. But if we wanted to continue the loop until you enter bin, we can do that by setting the input variable. We'll define the input as an empty string outside of the loop, empty string. And instead of a for loop, we're going to use a while loop, right? Now this is a little bit, I won't say more powerful, but it's used for a different use case. In this case, our condition isn't a math equation. Our condition is going to be, we're going to go back and use what we talked about last time. So if the input dot to lowercase is equal to bin, it's not equal to bin. So if you input a name that is not bin, it's going to keep looping here. So we'll do save and refresh. Let's see if this works. Jack. Nope, name is not Jack. Susan. Billy. And it'll keep on doing this until, until we enter bin, which is my name. And then it's finished because it keeps doing this loop and asking for a prompt every single time until the case inside the while loop is false. So while this thing is true, it's going to keep doing what's in the code. That's why it's called the while loop, while the condition is true. So we can do the same thing here, and refresh, but this will, as long as input is equal to bin, it'll keep repeating, right? And since we never asked for an initial input, the very first case, input is going to be an empty string, and an empty string is not equal to bin. So we'll have to ask for an input very first time. Save and refresh. What's your name? My name is Ben. My name is still Ben. Ben Jack. And it's done. Because once it finally gets to Jack, input is not Ben anymore. So this becomes false and it goes out of the loop and goes directly to finish. Now we did have to ask for input up here. So you can see that the while loop is at the very top of the loop, or the while statement is at the very top of the loop. So it's going to check this before every time it runs here. So that's why we had to ask for the first time. Now there's another kind of loop called a do while loop. Put a do here and then put the while at the end. Here. I think this works. We'll see what happens. It works in other languages, so I think it works in JavaScript. We'll find out. We're about to find out. Refresh. Yep. There we go. There we go. Exact same thing, except we do. Reason it's called the do while loop is because it does. We do this in the block at least one time. So we do this, and then while the condition is true, it'll go back to the top and do it again while it's true. So if we input Ben the first time, Ben is equal to Ben. It'll do it one time. It'll check the condition. Oh, it's true. We'll do it again. As soon as it's not Ben, then it goes directly to finish. You don't see this very often. It's usually not as common to do it that way. So most of the time, it'll just be a while loop because you want to keep doing what's inside, just based on this. So let's do something a little bit more complex. The first input is going to be, we'll do 0. We're going to do a little bit math here. So enter a number. Remember what it is. Okay. So input, we'll have to input equals number, input to convert it to a number. And instead, the while loop is going to, we'll have a new input equals 0. So then we'll change this to while input is equal to new input, or rather not input. Okay, so while the input that we inputted up here is not equal to the new input, which we defined here, then it's going to keep doing what's in the loop. So if we run this right now, new input is going to start out as 0, right? And we never change new input inside the loop. So this is just going to, keep going forever, and we're going to get stuck in an infinite loop, which will eventually break the browser again. So what we're going to do here is we're going to copy input and put it down here, but new input. Oops. New input. And we'll say, guess what you entered earlier. New input equals number, new input. And we'll put here your guess. And let's write something up here so that we don't actually forget what input is. So document.write your number. And input. So what we'll do is ask for a number, write out that number. Put that in quotes. You're going to write out that number. Then it's going to go to this loop, the while loop. It's going to start asking for new inputs, which is guess what number you entered earlier. And it's going to keep running the loop until the new input is equal to the old input. So as long as, while this is true, so while these two numbers are not equal, it's going to keep running. Let's do a save. We'll do refresh, enter your first number. We'll do 100. Okay, so that's right here. Now it printed out your number is 100, your number right here. So now we're inside the loop. So guess what number you entered earlier? It's 10. Okay, well, let's see what happened here. So your input, let's keep going. So it'll keep looping until the number is, oh, okay. So that's the problem right there. So let's jump out of this. So we're putting in 100, and 100 is going to be our old guess, our old number. And oh, it finished because the number is correct. So let's change this because we're putting in out the wrong input. So save that, refresh. So number is 100. Okay, so as long as the number that we input is not 100, so 2, your guess is 2, but that's wrong. So we're going to do the loop again. And 5. 5 is still wrong, so we're going to do the loop again. Finally, we're at 100. Okay, and since the guess is 100, and that's the number we put in originally, now this condition is false, and it's going to exit the loop. So what you'll need to do is to make sure that you're not in some kind of an infinite loop. Like, for instance, what if you forgot what number you input before? All right, you're going to have what's called an exit case. So we'll do var max attempts equals 5. So what we're going to want to do is have max attempts is 5 and current attempt equals 0. Okay. So at the bottom here, we're going to take current attempt, add 1 to it. So now we're keeping track of how many times we've run through the loop, right? And we're going to put a big OR. We'll have to do a big AND here. And max attempts, or the current attempt, is less than max attempts. So remember that an AND requires both of these clauses to equal true in order for this whole thing to be true. So while this whole thing is true, we're going to keep running through, right? So the exit case is that the current attempt is going to be greater than or equal to 5. Because as soon as this becomes false, this is also, the whole thing is going to be false, and we're going to exit the loop. So let's see. We'll move this down below so we can keep track visually of what the attempt is. Attempt plus current attempt. Let's finish that off and save that. So we've hard-coded max attempts is 5 in the code. So worst case scenario, if we forget what number we inputted up here, as long as we're below the number of allowed attempts, it'll keep going. But as soon as we exceed the max amount of attempts that we're allowed, it'll finish up. We'll do a refresh, enter a number, and we're going to be 100. So what happened here? So current attempt, why did this only work one time? So current attempt, I spelled this wrong, attempt. Oops. Current attempt. This is undefined, and that, let's copy and see what happens here. Next attempt, make sure that you got all your variables called properly. Current attempt plus equals 1, so that should be 0. And current attempt, and we're outputting this whole thing. Let's try this again. Refresh. Enter your number. 100. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we entered 100. So input is not equal to new input, which is what we had before. And current attempt, which is currently 0, is less than the number of max attempts. So we'll enter 1. That's wrong, but it's only our first attempt. So we'll keep asking. 2. Let's try another one, 18. Still wrong. So that's the third attempt. Number 6, still wrong. Attempt is 4. Okay, this is our last attempt. It's wrong, but we're at attempt 5. So it exits out of the loop and is finished. So you're always going to want to have some sort of exit condition. So let's try running this again. So let's say number is going to be 100 again. And we'll do, let's see, we'll do 4. So that's our first attempt. But what if we got it right on our second attempt? Okay. Well, this part of the clause is false now because input is now equal to input, which this is false, even though the exit condition is still true. This is still acceptable. So let's play a little game. We can make this into a little game. Instead of asking for a number, equals, we're going to use a thing called math.random. And that is going to give us a number that is in between 0 and 1, right? Random number between 0 and 1. And we'll output that right here just so we can see what happens. So math is a special object, a library, and it's got a bunch of functions on it like random and power and square root, things like that. So let's see. Let's refresh here. And this whole thing is our new random number, right? So what is our guess? Our guess is, okay, well, what number? 1. Oh, that's wrong. 4, 8, no. 12, still wrong. 0.5. Well, that was wrong, but last attempt, so, you know, we failed out. So let's at the bottom put a if statement so that we know that if the current attempt is equal to max attempts, that means we're going to be exiting the loop because we failed. Right. You lose. Game over. Just to have a little message to know why we exited. Right. So we'll save that. Refresh this again. Well, 1, no, 2, 5, 95, 6. Oh, we lost because we ran out of attempts, right? So that's how you can make a little game of some sort. Let's try that again with 4. So we're going to put this whole number in. Let's see if I can get this right the first time. 5, 7, 7, 9, 2, 8, 1, 8, 9, 8, 4, 3, 8, 8, 3, 6. So that looks like the right number. Okay. Oh, we guessed exactly right. So we finished on attempt 2 and we didn't lose. So that worked perfectly. But using this whole gigantic number is a little bit much. So when we get down to input, we're going to make it a little bit easier to go to see. So we're going to input equals input times 10, right? So basic math, we're going to multiply by 10. It's going to basically move the decimal point over. So it'll be 5.7792, right? Then what we can do is input equals math.floor input again. So what this function does is it just basically rounds down the number to the nearest integer. So let's see what happens here. File save, refresh. Number is 0, number is 3, because the whole number is, you know, we're just getting the first little part. So let's see, 3. And, you know, we can do 100 or even 1,000 to get a bigger integer, because we're just moving the integer over a little bit, the decimal over a little bit. So 316, you know, let's put 316 to get out of there. Come on, 316. There we go. Okay, refresh. Got a new random number, and that's how you get a random number. Have a little bit of a game there, and maybe 5 times is too much. Let's just let them ask 2 times. You know, if you don't get it the first time, that's okay. You can guess again but we lose because we can only do it. So that's kind of one of the reasons you might use a loop here, like a while loop. So because our condition is a little bit more complex than just an incrementing number. We're not doing it just a set number of times. We're doing it until an actual condition is you know, gotten to. So we're going to keep doing this until we're outside of this condition. This condition is false. Then we're going to exit the loop. You can make little games, and, you know, using math.random can really, you know, introduce a little bit more, you know, randomness to your program. But we're not going to focus too much on math. Right now, I just wanted to show you how the loop works. So I think that's it for this time. We're running a little bit longer than the last one, but I think we came up with some interesting little program there. Next time, I think we might talk about functions and how to define your own functions, which is another really important part to programming. We're not going to get into all the details of how JavaScript works with functions right now, because this is just a really basic tutorial. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.